Now we're getting into some creative...
You know, those people who did interrogations came up with something. They were always sitting around thinking, what can we do next? The Judas Cradle. Now this was a cradle. The victim was hoisted above the pyramid, which is this pyramid shape here, and slowly lowered, crotch first, onto the sharpened pinnacle.
It looks like that would go right in the...
yes, it does.
The bum-bum, yes.
It goes into those nether region. Now, hinging on the torturer's mood, he could vary the amount of the victim's body weight applied to the point. The Judas Cradle was a pyramid-shaped seat used for torture. The victim was placed on the top of it with the point inserted into their anus or into their hoo-hoo.
Yikes!
And then they were slowly lowered by ropes. Some theories suggest that the intended effect was to stretch the orifice over a long period of time or to slowly impale. The victim was usually naked, adding to the humiliation already endured. Because you know, nakedness at that time was something that was very frowned on. People were very pious and modest.
I'm okay with being naked, but I mean, getting something inside your butt is where it seems to be a... That was definitely a not done at the time.
Well, the other thing was, depending on the whim of the torturer, they could raise them up and drop them from varied heights onto this.
Why would they do that?
Because it would depend on how much they were getting frustrated by, I'm not confessing.
I would never be that frustrated with another living thing, I hope.
Now, you notice that this was also adding to the humiliation. Besides all this, besides it going into the nether region and being naked, it was usually in front of a lot of people.
Oh yeah, lots of crowd. Yeah,
lots of witnesses.
Sell tickets.
Clergy, the nobles.
Oh yeah, you know, you haven't really made your resume for becoming pope until you've witnessed somebody having that done in front of you.
Now, there's another one that's called the cradle, also known as the Catholic gilt, or also known as the iron horse. And this was used, is nastier than the other one. It's nastier than the Judas Cradle, if you can believe. We believe the picture does all the explaining for you.
I think that really says it all to me. The weight from the ankles probably would make it to where you were being pulled down onto the uncomfortable.
Well, it would go at the juxtaposition of your thighs to your torso.
And back then they only let ladies ride side saddle, so that's...
They weren't used to that.
Yeah, that's potentially brutal.
Now, another one is the Iron Maiden.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the Iron Maiden, it was...
she's dressed for it, at least.
A forger of coins was placed inside, and the doors shut slowly, so that the very sharp points penetrated his arms and legs in several places, and his belly and his chest and his bladder and the root of his member and his eyes and his shoulders and his buttocks, but not enough to kill him. So he remained there, making a great cry and lament for 2 days, after which he died. That was a description of what happened to a forger.
A forger?
A forger.
Okay,
now,
don't write bad checks is the lesson to be learned.
Or make bad coins.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about this is there has never been historically found an Iron Maiden that was reportedly used. Now, there are Iron Maidens that are found later on, but they were usually just enough of a psychological, I'm not going to do anything, I'm telling you now. Now, another side bent to this is there is a story of an Iron Maiden being made, and the spikes were hollowed so that the blood would drain.
Sanguine.
It was a
sanguination.
Yes, a sanguination. Yeah.
Thank you, CSI.
Well, actually, that was from D&D. It was one of my treats that I did for my people.
Good times.
Interrogation chair. Please note the comfy upholstery.
I don't think Lazy Boy will be making any of these.
Not only were the hundreds of tiny spikes uncomfortable to sit on, but a fire was usually kindled under the iron chair to make it reach a horribly scalding point.
Because, you know, the spikes in your back and butt weren't enough. They just wanted to make sure to make them hot, too.
Nothing says I care than scalded skin.
Oh, good times.
Now, there's impalement. We have the story of Dracula, which was from Vlad the Impaler.
The method of execution by being put on a spike that you would slowly over days fall further down.
Yes, this was the standard form of punishment for traitors in Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Salih during the Middle Ages. Believe it or not, once the lengthy spike entered the victim's posterior and exited through their mouth or throat, the victim might live for more than a day in this state and was left to crawl in the dirt for all to watch. Yuck. Now, there's another one here, and it's just a little bit too gruesome to show a picture of. And it's called the saw. The saw may represent human ingenuity's darkest hour. The idea was that when a victim was suspended upside down, now
Yes.
get this vision, feet apart,
Right.
most of the blood would go to the head. That is the important part of this process, you see, because as the torturers saw into the victim's crotch, all the blood of the head would oxygenate and the brain so that the victim would not pass out as one normally would under such excruciating pain. So they would take a two-handed or two-person tree saw and saw them through the middle, starting at their crotch down.
Why am I thinking this is going to be in the next Saw movie?
Yes, typically the saw would reach the victim's navel before unconsciousness would take hold, and sometimes as far as the midriff.
Why would they do?
Well, it's one way to make sure you fit into your tight pants.
Yeah, I guess. Thanks.
Thumb screws.
Thumb screws.
Or in this case, this is a neck brace.
Really?
So you couldn't move very much, and it was heavy. Nice spikes. Thumb screws would look like this, only smaller. They would screw the thumb so that the spikes would pierce in.
I'm sorry, but that would probably hit the jugular.
It would hit the jugular on the neck one. On the ones, it would amputate the fingers.
Oh, man.
Now here's one that's interesting before we get to the final one. This one is called a scold. Now there are different shapes here because it was a fashion statement.
You used that word earlier about gossips.
Yes, gossip. So if a woman was speaking out of turn, out of her place, or speaking ill of the elders, or speaking bad of the royalty, or it just made her husband very upset, the husband would then put a scold on her head, and they looked like these different types of things. And he would lead her through the town on a chain.
Now, where did they usually do this?
In the middle of the village, and they did it all through Europe.
All through Europe?
All through Europe. Now, you notice this one has a very sharp, pointy proboscis.
Yes.
Well, it's because she had a sharp tongue.
Oh, clever.
Now, it was not be painful, it was mainly humiliation. Now, if there was a scold and next door neighbor was a scold, and they were fighting, let's say nagging across the fence,
Bickering at each other.
some of these scolds were made to be hooked to another so they could be face to face and left in the middle of the village square. And they would sit there and hurl insults at each other until they could do no longer.
Huh. Well, that's one way to solve a conflict.
Yes, I was thinking about this for my children. Now, the last one is breaking with the wheel. Now, we talked a little bit about the wheel.
Okay.
You still here? Okay.
I'm still here.
Here we go.
After the saw, I'm all right. I think I can't be much worse than the saw.
Okay, in terms of frequency used, the wheel was second only to hanging during the Middle Ages. Most of the victims, usually naked, had each of their limbs spread apart and tied to the ground. However, wooden codpieces were placed under each major joint, such as the wrists, ankles, knees, hips, and shoulders. The torturer would then begin to smash each limb and joint with the heavy iron-enhanced wheel. But that was just the beginning of the nightmare. Once the limbs were reduced to gelatinous appendages of mashed bones, blood, and flesh, each arm and leg was braided into the spokes of the wheel and then hoisted upright for display. The agonizing victim would remain in this position for days as crows and insects feasted on him or her until death.
Well, that's not as horrible as the saw in terms of graphic, but it's a slow, painful way to die, I guess.
Yes.
Outside of ways to die or be tortured to death until confession, there was one thing. I'm wondering if you're familiar with cockle shells?
Cockle shells. Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit? I became familiar with them because I saw the nursery rhyme, of all things to reveal a torture device in, Mary, Mary, quite contrary, has a line about cockle shells in it. And apparently they were a device used to crush the genitals?
Yes, they were, well, it would take the person and get them tutored.
Tutored?
Oh, wait a minute, I meant neutered.
Yes. Yes, and yeah, that was one of many things apparently that Mary was associated with during her brief reign.
Yes.
So thankfully her reign was, I suppose, brief.
Well, most fairy tales, or not fairy tales, but most nursery rhymes were instructional tools for kids to learn about things like the plague and all sorts of things. As I'm sure you'll talk about those.
Yes, I have that episode of Renlightenment coming up soon as well. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. But there was other things like the hot pokers, the hooks. There was all sorts of things. The mind is a terrible thing, as you can see by all the different things that people use to get confessions.
It's amazing that we don't come up with more ways to invoke good feelings in each other. Like, for every massage chair, there's a torture chair.
That's right.
I'd like to think that some research and development would go into the good ones, but back then, not so much.
Makes the hot light and the rubber light tame.
Yeah. Well, as you can see, I am right now sitting on a rack that we'll be willing to discuss. How exactly would this work?
Well, this is a rack that's a 3-to-1 ratio. When you go and click it here, each movement of click would be a 3-to-1 as far as pulling it. What you would have is a person would have their feet attached to the buckles there.
Manacles at the feet.
And then they would also be attached by their arms here. They would be laid out across this. Now you notice it's not built for comfort because, well, comfort's not what we're going to do here.
Right.
But if you notice that you're a little bit small and you want to start playing basketball, this is a good thing to use because it will stretch the arms. Now the 3-to-1 ratio, what it has is that one click, you hear lots of little clicks over on the other side here. That is more of a device to make it so that it's slow, but it also is a psychological device, the clicking sound, because you know each click is making you a little bit longer and a little bit longer. This would actually pull until it would separate the shoulders, or actually if you go any further you can actually separate parts of the body with this.
So I guess the question then people would probably be wondering is, where did this come from and why does somebody have it right now?
Well, this is actually an old movie prop from I think the 1930s. It was used in an actual dungeon scene, and it was acquired by a friend of ours, and he brought it to our special place here. But it's a museum quality. It's very well built. It takes 8 men to move it. It is all solid timber. And steel.
Wow. Huh. Well, I think that's
Care to take a pull?
the wife has requested I'm to say no.
I just want to know if you want it a little bit taller.
She's worried that you won't let me come back, or that I won't want to.
You'll be changed.
Indeed. Indeed. All right. Well, thank you, Dennis, for showing us all of this stuff today. I'm rather impressed and intimidated. So
perfect.
But I guess that's the point. It's a torture device. So another edition of
I have
Renlightenment.
nowhere to do where to go with this before it gets really bad. Let's just. I thought you were.
Dan, why are you playing with the